Be sure you download the note card that goes along with this sermon, and you can print it out and you can follow along, fill it in as you follow the sermon. If you like this sermon, want to see more like this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, also hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when other new content is added to this site. We try to add sermons as often as we can. We'll try to add some Bible question and answers that we've done before in the past, other things we may be adding to this. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to follow us on social media, there are links to our social media accounts in the video description below. Now, let's jump into the sermon.
The Old Testament, or the Bible in general, can be broken down into 17 time periods. We have the period before the flood, running from creation to around 2350 BC. Creation being either 4004, most time what I hear, but I've heard as late as 4014 as far as a date. Then the flood, the scattering of the people, Tower of Babel, Genesis chapter 11. Then the story of the patriarchs. We know Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The Exodus under Moses. We have been covering up to this point, and today we start in the wandering in the wilderness based on Numbers chapter 10, beginning around verse 40, I think it is, in that chapter. It's where we'll find this, they're starting to leave. And we have the other periods, but for this study, we want to pay particular attention to the wandering in the wilderness, which is what will be covered roughly around chapter 14, chapter 15, when they disbelieve the two spies that says we can take the land. So with this lesson, we continue our study of the book of Numbers, a study through the book of Numbers. Numbers is the history of Israel's 40 years of having to wander in the wilderness due to disobedience. The name comes from the census that are taken twice, one in Numbers chapter 1, one we find taken in Numbers chapter 26 at the direction of God, covering a 39-year period of time that it's going to take them to go to Canaan based on a trip that would normally take 3, maybe 4 days, but because of disobedience, having to take that long. Israel as a nation was in its infancies. They were still encamped at Mount Sinai when the book starts, and only 13 months after the Exodus from Egypt. The dates bear that out for us. Exodus chapter 40, verse 17, and we've looked at Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. The Levitical instructions were given in the month between these two dates. Here is what has always been taught as the route coming from Mount Sinai up to Kadesh Barnea versus what has been proven lately through evidence to be the alternate route and what is believed now to be the actual route that was taken to Mount Sinai, being in the Arabian Peninsula like Paul refers to it, to Kadesh Barnea, and we find the wilderness wandering starts there because the spies are going to be sent. We're going to find out in this lesson the spies are sent in to spy out the land of Canaan. They could have went straight up, but God, because of their disobedience, we'll find doesn't allow that. An overview of the book of Numbers. Number 4 book in the order written in the Christian Bible. Number of chapters 36. It's the type of, it's history, part of the Pentateuch. as we call it, and written around 1400 BC, as we said, covering a time period roughly. Pause right here. The book of Numbers is the fourth book in the Old Testament, the Christian Old Testament. Number of chapters, 36, type of literature, history, and it's part of the Pentateuch. Written around 1400 BC, time period covered, 1450 to roughly 1400 BC. Of course, Moses is the author. We have just finishing up the very first division. Israel prepares to leave Mount Zion. In this lesson, around the end of the chapter, we are going to see Israel moves toward Kadesh Barnea. Is what's going to happen. And as we look at it on Bible Project's side here, we see here's our panel. We've talked about laws about ritual purity in the last lesson, and we're starting to move. God says it's time to move. He's given them all the preliminary information so they can know the commands, the alarms, the trumpet blows, the movement by day, the movement by night, the cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night. And we notice it's not going to take very long, and the people are going to complain. Here's an old drawing of mine that has everything laid out again. The first 10 chapters at Mount Zion till they get to chapter 10, verse 10. Chapter 11, we find the command to move forward is given. Doesn't take long to get into the wilderness of Paran, and Israel complains as we saw in the wilderness of Paran, what we have right there. The theme, as we've talked about, is the consequence of disbelief in God and disobedience to God. That's what we're going to see as we look at this. Preview of the book, real quick. The old generation, chapters 1 through 14, we'll finish up with them in this lesson. Then we'll get into the transitional period in the next lesson. The new generation then at chapter 21 through 36 are at the doorway to Canaan, ready to go in. But of course, for now, we're finishing up part 1, the preparation of the old generation to inherit the promised land. Now, like we say, if they have not disobeyed, 3 days would have put them into Canaan. They would have been that close to getting into Canaan. Preparation to go. Part 2, we're going to start that today. The failure of the old generation to inherit the promised land. That failure, of course, comes about because of disobedience, because of not obeying Joshua and Caleb, 2 of the spies that said, we can take the land. The rest of part 2 is the failure of Israel en route to Kadesh Barnea. We'll see that on the map again. The climatic failure of Israel at Kadesh Barnea. The failure of Israel in the wilderness, we'll see that in next week's lesson. The failure of Israel en route to Moab, 20 through 21. Part 3, then we'll cover the preparation of the new generation. The old generation by this time will have died off in the wilderness. Reorganization of Israel. You've got a new generation, so you have to reorganize. Regulations, again, have to be taught to the new generation. They're of the age to understand. Conquest and division of Israel will be talked about. So with that, let's get into today's lesson covering Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, starting in verse 11 and going through chapter 14, the end of the chapter, verse 45. Numbers chapter 10, verse 14, where we began today. And we find the standard of the camp of the people of Judah set out first by their companies. They're leaving Mount Sinai. And over their company was Nahshon, the son of Abimadab. And over the company of the tribe of the people of Issachar. And so we have all the tribes lining up in their order. Details are given here down through these verses of how they are going to go through, how they're going to come out in marching, like military precision. Military, when you march, when you're in a parade or whatever, you're in a certain order. Squadrons are in a certain order. Flights within the squadron would be in a certain order. You'd have the squadron, and the flights that are within that squadron would go. So that's what we have in the remainder of chapter 10, the leaving. But as good as that is, finally leaving Mount Sinai to go to the promised land is the idea, ready to go. It doesn't take long. Numbers chapter 11. Now the people became like those who complain of the Lord. When the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. Some of the outlying parts of the camp, this translation says. The people cried out to Moses, verse 2, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of the place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. And says, now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. That's these people doing the complaining. The people of Israel also wept again and said, oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Oh, how terrible shape we're in. It's kind of the idea of what they're saying. The manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like the bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in hand mills, or beat it in mortars, boiled it in pots, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout the camp, their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servants? Even Moses here, complaining about this. Verse 13. Where am I going to get meat for all these people, he says. We find in verse 13, Moses is asking God this. And then verse 18 of this same chapter, God says, say to the people, consecrate yourself for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore, the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day or 2 days or 5 days or 10 days or 20 days, but a whole month. And until it comes out of your nostrils, you're going to eat so much meat, you're going to get tired of meat. The idea we have there is what he says. You're just going to get so tired of it. You're going to be tired of meat. You're going to wish you hadn't have wept for meat. Moses said, the people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot. And you have said, I will give them meat that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them and be enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them and be enough for them? And the Lord said to Moses, watch this now, verse 28. Is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not. Moses, you watch. And we see on the illustration on the chart here, verse 31. But let's continue at verse 24. Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, My Lord Moses, stop them. But Moses said to him, Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and the Lord would put his Spirit on them. And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. In other words, Moses appreciated the assistance. And then verse 31, here's what happens. A wind from the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea and let them fall beside the camp about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side. We're talking roughly 3 miles worth of quail, outreaching 3 miles. And that may be similar in our area here, halfway from here to Taylor, I think is 6 miles, so it would be halfway distance between the 2 little towns. A day's journey on either side, around the camp, about 2 cubits above ground. So that's 36 inches above ground. That's a lot of quail. And the people rose all that day and all that night and all the next day and gathered the quail. Those who gathered least gathered 10 homers. Now we'll get a measurement for that, have that measurement for Sunday, try to. And they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. And while the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Therefore, the name of the place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had the craving, the complainers. God brought a plague on. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the people journeyed to Haviroth, and they remained at Hatheroth. And then this name, the meaning of this name means graves of lust. This Hazeroth. That's the meaning of it. Then that brings us to Numbers chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12, it begins with verse 1. Miriam, that's Moses' sister, and Aaron his brother spoke against Moses because of the Kishite women, or woman, who he had married. For he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, Has the Lord indeed spoken through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. And now the man Moses was very meek, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. He was a humble man. That's what that's saying. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. And the three came out, and the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forward, and he said, "Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth." I don't speak to Moses like I speak to the prophets. He is such a servant of mine, I speak to him directly, in other words. He said, "I speak mouth to mouth, clearly and not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" The anger of the Lord was kindled. This made the Lord mad. Them challenging Moses' authority. And when the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam, this is his sister, was leprous like snow. Aaron toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, do not punish us, because we have done foolishly and have sinned." He admitted it. "Let her not be as one of the dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb." And Moses cried to the Lord. Here it is. "Oh, please, heal her, please." He says, so the Lord said to Moses, "If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again." So there's consequences for sin. There's consequences for them speaking against Moses, who God had chosen to be the spokesperson for the people. So she's shut outside the camp for 7 days. People did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. After that, the people set out from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran. So now they're in the wilderness of Paran. Got through the complaining. Moses, Aaron and Miriam are complaining to Moses because they felt like that God ought to speak to them too. God gets upset at this. Miriam is made a leper. Consequences for this complaining. She's put outside the camp 7 days. Brings us to Numbers chapter 13. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel." Now notice what he says. He says, "I'm giving this land." No strength on their own has to be given here. Lord says, "I'm giving it to the people of Israel. From each tribe, from their fathers, you shall send men, a man, every one a chief among them." The chief, the elders of each tribe, their name. Go over to chapter 13, verse 16. These were the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. Moses sent them to spy out the land and said to them, watch this now. He says, "Go up," you see it on the map now, "into the Negev. Go up into the hill country, over here to the right." Don't have a pointer, but if you'll look over as you look at this picture, look to your left as you face your computer screen, and you'll see it says "Spies Sent Out." They are in Kadesh Barnea. That's where they are located at this time. They have come from Mount Sinai over in the Arabian Peninsula, which you see Edom over there on the right, over in that way. They have come up through here to Kadesh Barnea. The spies are sent northward. See, it's not very far into Canaan to spy out the land. You'll see Beersheba there. You'll see Hormah there. You'll see Gera there, Lachish there, some places you recognize, Hebron there, the coast, going to the coast, and there's Gaza. we've been hearing about in our local news lately here in 2023, October 2023. But that's how they're sent. Now he tells them to go up to the Negeb, go up into the hill country and see what the land is and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak. Now, he don't say go up there and see if we can whip them all or not. He says go see if they are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad. I want you to, Lord already knows. He wants them to see for himself what he has been saying about this land of Canaan. That it is indeed the way that he said it's going to be when they pick grapes off of vines they did not plant. How that's going to be, how it's going to be. Lord knows it's good. Said, are the cities they dwell in, are they camps? Are they like tents, in other words? Or are they strongholds? Do they have permanent dwellings? Whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are trees in it or not. Said, be of good courage. Then he says, bring some of the fruit back of the land. Now the time was the season for the first ripe grapes. Now keep that in mind. So my estimation, that would be August, September for our time period. Concord grapes usually really come in certain parts of this country, up in the north part of the United States. Pennsylvania is known, Ohio, those areas are known for Concord grape growth. And I always saw it. School started, always told me it was time for grapes, and Mama would ask me, say, well, go to Mr. Guthrie and see if he has going to have any grapes for sale this year. And she made grape jelly. Didn't make strawberry jelly out of grape jelly, but she made grape jelly. There I go again. So they went up, spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin. You can see it on the map. There's wilderness of Zin. See the wilderness of Zin. To Rehob, and you look on the map far enough, I don't spot it right off, but it'll be on this map somewhere. It'll be on here. Near Labo Hamath, you can find that probably on here somewhere. And they went up into the Negeb, came to Hebron. Look how far up they went, to Hebron, to Ahiman and Shisha, these places. The descendants of Anak were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. And they came to the valley of Eshcol. And we'll see there's the valley up there near Hebron, if you look on that map that we've got on the screen. And they came there and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes. Now I want you to listen to this description. They carried it on a pole between two of them. I've never had grapes that big. I've had big clusters, but not that big. They also brought some pomegranates and figs, and that place was called the Valley of Eshcol. That's what we have. Because of the cluster that the people of Israel cut down from there. So the land is definitely good. That's some good fertile land to grow grapes that big, I'm telling you. And at the end of the 40 days, they return from spying. So they're going to return from spying. And they came to Moses and Aaron. Here comes the report. They bring back this grape. The spies speak well. All of them are going to speak well of the land. The 10 spies, they're going to speak of the greatness of the people there, magnifying the challenge. Now, here's what these spies are going to do. They're going to magnify the challenge that we're going to have, in other words. Caleb and Joshua, you get over here to verse 27 through 33, they trust in the Lord. And they trust in the Lord that He will have the victory for Israel. Now, that's very important, so let's read this. They told him, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, there's where Jerusalem, talking about that area. The Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan." So that's how extensive they got. So that gets them above the Dead Sea. The Canaanites dwelt by the sea along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people. Here's Caleb before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overtake it." Now see, they're within a day, they can go up in there from right here. Then the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are." See, they're not thinking about the Lord's already given them the land. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. It's all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." There's the reports. There's the fruit. Caleb and Joshua. Caleb says we should go take the land. The 10 spies said it's a land that devours its inhabitants. The other men who went with Caleb says these men are great size. We have become like grasshoppers in our own sight. That's how big it is. Oh, woe is me. These conflicting reports. They all agreed it was a good land, but we have conflicting reports. The 10 spies saw with the eyes of flesh and put the difficulty between themselves and God as worriers do now, people that worry. The 2 spies, they saw with the eye of faith, and they put God between themselves and the difficulty. And those who trust God do that. So if I trust, I do not worry. If I worry, I do not trust. Now, note, if you will, Psalm 57. Let's get over to Psalm 57. Psalm 57 is this big old Bible here, this large print Bible. I'm not to the days of needing a large print, but it's nice in a situation like this. Look at Psalm 57, verse 1. "Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, for in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by." Put it in God's hands. Caleb says, trust God, let's go up and take it. So there's the 2 conflicting reports, which brings us to our last chapter for this study, chapter 14. So chapter 14, all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses. The whole congregation said to him, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt. Why have you brought us in here to be killed by these people?" In other words. Or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? Let's go back and return. They forgot about the hard time they had in Egypt, you see. So the people believe what you have here. Look at verse 4. They said to one another, "Let us choose a leadership and go back to Egypt." That's what we need to do. So with their hand almost on the prize, the people wanted a new leader that would lead them back to Egypt. Say, "Pharaoh, here we are again. We're back to serve you." They disbelieved and rebelled and called for the stoning of Caleb and Joshua. Look at verse 10. Verse 10. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones, but the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, look at verse 11, the intercession here of Moses. How long will this people despise me? How long will they not believe in me? In spite of all the signs that I have done among them, here's what God wanted to do. I will strike them with pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. That's what God wanted to do. We have there. In verse 11, he says this. Now, look at verse 17. Moses intercedes here for the people. And in verse 17 is what we want. Verse 17. And now please let the power of the Lord be great as you have promised, saying, the Lord is slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Please pardon the iniquity of this people, Moses says, according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt until now. He calls on God to forgive them. So what does God do? So God's now going to sentence all the generation over 20 years of age to death in the wilderness. The children aren't going to suffer. The children are going to be the ones. Now, you old generation, you don't want to go in? Okay, you don't have to go in. You're not going to go in. Look at what he says in verse 20. The Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, in other words, the word of these 10 spies, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers. And none of those who despise me shall see it. Who's going to see it out of these spies? Here it is, verse 24. My servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land, he says, which he went in, and his descendants shall possess it. Now, since the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valleys, turn tomorrow and set out for the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. In other words, you're turning back. We're turning you back to the right. You're going back to the right. Here, verse 25, mark this verse, is where the wilderness wandering starts. They were within a day. They could have just marched right up into there. Matter of fact, I want you to see what happens right after this. Now, we see what the Lord says. He says, how long shall this wicked congregation grumble against me? I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel, which they grumble against me. Say to them, as I live, declares the Lord, what you have said in my hearing, I will do. Your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and of all of your numbers listed in the census from 20 years old and upward who have grumbled against me, not one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. Your little ones, who you said would become a prey, I will bring in, and they shall know the land that you have rejected. In other words, you've rejected this land by not listening to Joshua and Caleb. He goes on to say, your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years and shall suffer from your faithlessness. Let me say that again. Your children are going to be shepherds 40 years. They're going to because they got to wait on all you to die. You're not going in that land. So it's going to take 40 years. That's where we get the idea of generations, 40 years, 45 years. until the last of your dead bodies lies on the wilderness, according to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a year for each day. You shall bear your iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. I am the Lord, have spoken. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely this will I do to you, all this wicked congregation who are gathered together against me in this wilderness. They shall come to a full end, and there they shall die. Now, what's their reaction? Look at this, verse 36. This is powerful. The men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation grumble against him by bringing up a bad report about the land. The men who brought up a bad report of the land died by the plague before they all died right there. Those men did. And of those men who went to spy out the land, only Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, remained alive. When Moses told these words to all the people of Israel, they mourned greatly. They're sorry, but guess what? It's too late. You have the consequence of the sin. Sorry, don't feed the bulldog, I always heard. In other words, a bulldog's still going to eat. There's still consequences to this sin. They rose up early in the morning. Now, they think they're going to take the land now on their own. Well, we must be able to take it. We're going to go take it, thinking God's going to help them. Said, went up to the heights of the hill. In other words, they got up on the hill where they could look down and see. Here we are. We'll go up to the place that the Lord has promised. We're going to go in there despite what the Lord says. For we have sinned. But Moses said, why now are you transgressing the command of the Lord when that will not succeed? In other words, the Lord's already told you what to do. The Lord has told you to turn right. You're going to be going in a circle in this land 40 years. You're going to go around and someone's going to look and say, well, didn't we pass that last year? Yeah, it's kind of the way, the feeling they're going to have with this wandering. And so the Lord is not among you. The Lord's already said He's not going to help you. He's not going to help you go into that land right now. But in His time, He's going to help you. So having been told what was going on, they're ashamed. They decide to obey, but God's no longer with them. Don't decide too late to obey God. Disbelief brings discipline and hinders God's blessing. The old generation was doomed to wander 38 years and never see the promised land that's only a short distance away. Now, what happened? Said, the Lord's not among you, lest you be struck down before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are facing you, and you shall fall by the sword, because you have turned back from following the Lord. The Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up to the heights of the hill country, although neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed out of the camp. And what happened? Verse 45, here's where we're going to end the story today. The Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down, defeated them, and pursued them even to Hormah. So there it is. They sent spies into the land like God told them to. They weren't to say whether they could overtake these people or not. They were just to give a report. Bring back some of the fruit so the people would be excited that they were going to get to go into Canaan now. But they rebelled against God, didn't listen. Here's a little poem I found that I really like this poem. 10 men who failed to see God saw cities impregnably high. 2 men looking off unto God saw doom for those cities draw nigh. 10 men who failed to see God saw giants frightfully tall. 2 men looking off unto God saw giants as grasshoppers small. 10 men who failed to see God reported, we're certain to fail. 2 men looking off unto God cried up, for with God we prevail. 10 men who failed to see God discouraged their brother men. 2 men perceive God everywhere. Are we of the 2 or we of the 10? Good question, isn't it? For us to close this lesson out. Next lesson, we'll be looking at Numbers chapter 15, verse 1. We'll go up to Numbers 19, verse 22. The failure continues. Remember, this old generation, 20 years and above, they have to die in the wilderness. They'll die in the wilderness. And it'll be roughly 38 years for that to happen. So we have the failure of Israel. We'll look at the failure of Israel in the wilderness. So if you found this video helpful and want to learn more, I want you to look in the links and download the note card. Well, we don't have a note card, but we may have some other material to go with this. So you can download, look in the description, and there will be links that let you download things that we'll put on this during this study. And all these studies that we always have material that we'll put there for your enhancement of your learning. But we do have our free Bible correspondence course there, a link to it, 4 lessons. That link will take you to the page on my website where they are, and you can download at your leisure. Thanks for watching or listening. In the meantime, in between time, see you next time. Cheerio, Bob's your uncle. We'll be back for our next study. If you are in the area, our service times are Sunday morning Bible study, 9:45 a.m., where we study not just about the Bible, but we study the Bible. Sunday morning assembly, 10:35. Sunday afternoon assembly at 4 p.m. if you're in the military, 1600 hours. Wednesday evening Bible study, 6:30. That'd be 1830 hours for our Bible study. We here at the Spring Hill Church of Christ want to help you with your growth in the knowledge of God's Word. Remember, we are in it for the likes and the subs, so be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you for watching or listening. In the meantime, in between time, see you next time. Cheerio. Bob's your uncle.